Before, four North Carolina A&T students sat at a lunch counter in Greensboro in an effort to gain equality for blacks, two Aggies were helping desegregate the United States military. Through their performances in World War I and World War II, Warren T. Gibbs and Charles H. Flowers helped to pave the way to President Harry S. Truman signing Executive Order 9981 on July 26, 1948. That order desegregated the military.
Warren T. Gibbs, of course, he was the president here at North Carolina A&T. He gained his notoriety, one as a soldier, fighting in World War I with the famed group 92nd Division of the Buffalo Soldiers over in Italy. And then as the war went on, World War I, he was attached to that particular unit. A lot of people don't know that during World War I, there were certain detachments that were actually sent to Italy, and Warren T. Gibbs was just one of the few African American officers who was assigned to fighting over in Italy.
Charles Flowers was a student at North Carolina A&T in the late 1930s. After 2 years at the school, he figured he didn't have enough money and he looked into a career in the military. Well, he didn't want to become a ground soldier, so he said, I'd like to fly. And around that time, the United States military had started allowing blacks to learn to fly, and they were going down to Tuskegee, Alabama, and they were learning to fly there. Well, in 1941, Charles Flowers ventured to the program and went through the program very well with great scores and everything, and qualified to become a pilot. However, the United States military said, well, it's impossible for you to have this kind of a record in class and have passed through all of these tests. We'll make you an instructor. So he wasn't qualified by their standards to be a pilot, so they allowed him to become an instructor. So from 1942, for 5 years after 1942, he served as an instructor in Tuskegee and produced hundreds of pilots. And that's pretty phenomenal for a person who said couldn't fly, and you trained hundreds of pilots to do what you couldn't do.
The Tuskegee Airmen, through exemplary military service during World War II, proved to the Commander-in-Chief, their Commander-in-Chief, first Roosevelt and then Truman, that America needed to be America, that a democratic nation actually needed to be democratic. And so the Tuskegee Airmen really, along with the Triple Nickels and other Red Ball Express and other military units of World War II that performed so well, proved to the Commander-in-Chief that they should be treated as Americans and that liberty and freedom should be for all. And so their service resulted in Executive Order 9981 issued by Harry Truman in 1948, which desegregated the military. Now the ball that starts rolling is this: how do we convince the federal government to kill Jim Crow? And the first blow came from the executive branch of the federal government in that executive order. That's directly related to the performance of the Tuskegee Airmen.
A&T first started military training in 1919 with Lieutenant Robert L. Campbell appointed as the first professor of military science. The ROTC program at A&T, one of the oldest in the country, received junior status in 1936 and senior status in 1942. Identified as 55 Charlie, the ROTC program commissioned its first 8 second lieutenants in 1947. The program has continuously provided the United States Army with leaders since then.
We did have our first graduating class in 1947. In fact, there's several, I think maybe 2 members that I know now that of that graduating class that are still living. But Executive Order 9981 was really an order signed by the President Truman, and what it did, it outlawed discrimination in the military, and it kind of said that you could no longer promote individuals based on race, and you could not discriminate against an individual. Well, what that did, it set the tone, I think, for many of our outstanding officers that were on active duty, that they at some point would get a fair shake. Now, I have to tell you that the law was put in effect in 1948, but it did not, many of them did not receive the benefits of that law. And I really think my generation benefited greatly from it because it meant that you could no longer discriminate based on race, gender, or ethnicity.
Benjamin O. Davis Sr. becomes a general right after that order is executed. What the War Department said, they started to realize by doing some studies that it was costing the military a lot of money to train soldiers at, say, Tuskegee Airfield, and then training other white soldiers at, another installation. Because you still have to appropriate money for training, you still have to appropriate funds for uniforms, and then you think about it, we're building and testing bombs. So you're gonna need that force, because when you're in a foxhole, bullet don't have no color. We all bleed the same. And you had, it was the right thing for Truman to do. Even his cabinet said, this must happen now.
In the past, I understand where history has come from. I understand that in the past there was a lot of segregation. I also understand that there are a lot of challenges, not only as a nation, but amongst different cultural backgrounds. But the beautiful thing about today is that, to me personally, in my opinion, the military is probably the most culturally diverse institution in the world.